but later never comes. It just keeps moving. The goalpost is always moving. When I get to the end of this launch, then I'll rest. When I hit this financial milestone, then I'll rest. When I get to this point, then I'll. I'm sure you've said that in your brain many, many times. There is no end point. This is life. This is it. You are in your life right now, and you get to be in the driver's seat of that. Welcome to the Flow Lane with me, Emma Maidment. This podcast is for the female entrepreneurs who want the both and big goals and a life that you can actually enjoy. We're talking sustainable scaling, working in flow, and creating a business that supports your energy, not drains it. Let's dive in. I'm going to say something that is probably not going to be liked by the part of you that's trying to prove yourself, is that hustle culture is not ambition. It is a slow leak on your life. And I say this as someone that has hustled my way to the top of many different industries over and over and over again. I see this constantly in my work. We get to this certain point in our life where we decide, you know what, I'm going all in. And then we just hustle until we get there and realize once we have the thing that we once wanted, what did it actually cost us? For me, this looked like the time that I made my first six figures in business, and I had never been more miserable. I had written on a piece of paper that I had this idea and I was going to turn it into a business. And it was going to make me six figures that year. And I was so excited. And for so many of us in the business world, that feels like the first financial milestone to hit. And so what did I do? I wrote it down, no other clear roadmap or strategy around it. And I just went for it. I hustled my way to that amount and I hit it quickly. And I realized, oh my goodness, I am so burnt out. My hair is literally falling out. I am constantly on my phone. I am always on. My nervous system is on. The first thing I do in the morning is check in on clients. Then my phone's constantly in my hand. I'm constantly measuring my output, right? By, do I feel busy? Therefore, am I productive? And then I look at, oh my goodness, what is this actually costing me? My skin was breaking out. I was having real big challenges inside of my relationships, and everything just felt like it was falling down around me, even though on paper, my success looked amazing. And I guess the irony of this is that I did that over and over again. I'm someone that has to learn my lesson the hard way. And I hope that by sharing this story and going on this journey together, you can also learn from my mistakes and now what I teach, which is the opposite of that. I am all about ending hustle culture. I was a part of that boss babe era, for those of you that remember it, where everyone was suddenly going to be like this female entrepreneur and I'm going to get out there and change the world. And it was cool until now you watch all those same women are having hormonal issues, fertility issues. They're burnt out because their adrenals couldn't handle the pace at which they had set themselves up for and the lack of structure in their business, which meant it was constantly reliant on them. They had to constantly be on and constantly had to hustle. So the success looks good, but it actually feels awful. And you have to look at what is the overall cost of that. So there's a question to ask yourself. It's not about how much can you do? It's about how much can your nervous system sustain? And there's a really clear difference because you are capable. You are so capable. And if push comes to shove, you can hustle your way to succeed at literally anything. Humans are literally hardwired to survive. If a tiger is coming at you, you bet your bottom dollar you will find some sort of superhuman strength in your legs to run away and find safety as fast as you possibly can, right? It's the same in business. When you're backed into a corner, you can. So it's not a question of can you, it's more a question of can your actual nervous system sustain that? And this is where this beautiful blend in my world comes together of understanding business systems and structure, of knowing my own story and the things that I did that got me into that situation. And then ultimately, what can your nervous system sustain and what actually supports the life that you really, really want? So I was deep in my girl boss hustle era. I was running at that point, it had gotten to a multi six-figure agency. marketing agency. I was teaching, I think, like 15 or 20 yoga classes a week, like an insane person. I was traveling all over the world offering workshops. I was saying yes to every single opportunity that came my way. And I was so deep in that hustle culture. If I wasn't busy, I would make myself busy. If I didn't feel that buzz of adrenaline, I would like have another coffee and just get on with it, because that was the era I was in. And then I met a millionaire who literally stopped me in my tracks and made me rethink everything. So I've just painted the picture of where I was at. Part of the things I was doing was teaching yoga and meditation, maybe not super mindfully if you've just listened to that story. And I get a call from this woman, seemingly out of nowhere. And this is what happens when you get little knocks from God, the universe, whatever your belief system is. And she's like, I need you to come and teach my friend to meditate. I want you to run a private session with him. He's just gotten a really upsetting cancer diagnosis. Can you help? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I offer these courses. This is what I do, blah, blah. She's like, great, come to this address. I arrive at the address and it's like that moment of, ah! I'm like, am I in a castle? Like, what is this? This place is insane. I'm in this neighborhood I've never even heard of. It is the nicest house I've ever seen in my life. I feel like I'm walking into some sort of queen's room. And I walk inside, it's just opulence, right? It's amazing. I'm like, wow, this is another level of wealth that I haven't experienced before. And so of course you're like, wow, this is goals. Like one day I'm going to roll up here in my Rolls Royce. And then I meet this man. He was much, much older than what I was and had so much more life experience. And like young, naive me at the time is sitting there going, what the hell am I going to offer this person? But okay, we're here. This is the task at hand. And he says to me, my whole life, I have defined success in a financial metric. If there wasn't a new car or a new house or some, luxury yacht holiday at the end of the job that I was doing, I didn't want it. And now I have 3 failed marriages, I have 3 children that won't speak to me, and I have a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. I am facing death literally in the eye, and your job is to teach me to let go. And I remember thinking, holy shit, no pressure. And it hit me in that moment, wow, here's someone that you would look to and think, oh my goodness, he has everything that most people would define as success, and he is miserable and literally dying. And so I took a deep breath and I taught him the meditation technique that I teach, and he bawled his eyes out and we had an incredible 3-day session together. He survived his cancer treatments and went on to do yoga retreats and travel the world and totally change his life. But I realized in that moment that hustling and the metric of success gets you so far until it doesn't. And so meeting this man who later in his life had seemingly on paper achieved everything that most people would write on their vision board, and he was so miserable and lacked all the other things that we need as humans to thrive, it made me question everything that I was doing. It made me actually stop and ask myself that same question that I just told you to ask. What can I actually do? And how can I actually have my nervous system sustain this? How do I actually create my own lifestyle so that I can still have the success, that I can still have the things that I desire in life, but not at the cost of my nervous system, of my health? And so writing down the figure is one thing, but you need to really deeply understand how you want your life to feel. How do you want your life to look like? What do you want your days to look like? Hustle culture ultimately sells you this promise, which is grind now, rest later. Particularly if you are a business owner, which I'm assuming you are if you are listening to this or watching this podcast. You have the opportunity to design your life. You get to create what your days look like. You get to create how you're generating revenue. You get to create which parts you have to lean into that are maybe uncomfortable or require a little bit of grit, and which parts you actually get to enjoy, which parts you actually get to rest without feeling like you're in trouble or that you need to earn that rest. You get to build it into it. You can literally hustle your way anywhere. And there's kind of a movement around taking messy action. And I've definitely told people to do that at times, because sometimes you just have to get out of your own way, let go of it being perfect, and take the messy action to get the thing going. It works to a point. And then once it tips into that hustle, once it taps into that point of this is not just messy action, this is just a mess, and it just spirals and spirals and spirals. You can't get out of it. You almost create like this prison for yourself. And so structure is what scales a business. And when you have structure, you're no longer hustling. You're no longer in this last minute, I'll just quickly get to it, I'll do that, and everything's in your brain. You're actually thinking like a CEO. You're actually thinking in structure, in compartmentalization, which means that you can scale sustainably and actually have a life that you want. Now, I told you earlier that I learned this lesson the hard way and that I learned it the hard way multiple times. So I had that interaction with that man. It shifted how I ran my businesses. It made me lean into structure. It made me lean into, okay, I'm not going to just run back to back to back to back retreats and then come back home and back to back to back. How about I actually have some time off after that? How about I actually build in some rest, some systems? How about I start to work with my cycle so that when I'm creative, I'm creating, and when I want to be a bit more inward, that's not required of me. I really started to lean into that side of my business, and I saw so much transformation. Not only did revenue feel more effortless, but I was actually enjoying myself. I was actually completing something and taking a moment to, in gratitude, taking a moment to actually look and go, wow, well done. Like, we did that. Okay. Rather than just my usual mentality, which was the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So all of that was going super well. And then we came to the 2020 mark. At that point, I was all in on in-person business. I was running retreats, as I mentioned before. I was doing a lot in the corporate world, speaking, well-being workshops, all that kind of stuff. I was teaching, people meditation, working with different executives. I was pretty much all in on in-person stuff. I still had an online presence. I need to make that really clear because I've been online for a long time. And I had some online kind of revenue streams, but it wasn't paying my rent, right? Like, I was all in on in-person stuff. And then we all know what happened at the beginning of 2020. The world did what it did, right? It imploded. And that meant that in-person work was kind of no longer an option. So literally overnight, I watched my very successful multi-six-figure business completely disappear. The revenue not just dip, gone, like no option to make it back, right? And so in that moment, what do? Well, you have to pivot. And so we pivoted, and we pivoted really, really, really quickly. And this is where that kind of hustle culture tendency starts to come back in, because sometimes you need that little bit of survival mode, right? We weren't thinking, how do we build a scalable business? We were thinking, how do we survive? And so then we got to this point of, okay, we are going to take everything that we're doing in the in-person world and take it online. So we built an online studio literally overnight. We ran to the store, we grabbed the last camera that was available, we grabbed the last microphone. We had no idea if this was going to work. We put it out there to my online community. This is the power of a personal brand. And we had 100 people join that class literally overnight. And we didn't have a Zoom room big enough. We had to figure out the tech. And from that moment on, we realized, okay, we're onto something and we have to move fast. So we really scrappily built our website. We really scrappily built the infrastructure to hold it all together, and we started running live classes. We scaled that business to then having 6 other teachers working for us. We had members from all over the world, and we supported people through what was one of the most challenging times in their lives. Now, the caveat to that, or I guess the problem that we faced, is that I got pregnant, and then I got really, really, really pregnant. And I was still doing handstands in my final days of pregnancy live on Zoom when I probably would have rather have been resting. And why is that? Because I didn't learn the previous lessons that I had already learned in my last businesses. I didn't think about, how do we actually scale this sustainably? I thought about, how do we survive? And our most popular product was my live classes. And I realized in that moment that we had conditioned our community to come from me. I had actually created a trap in that business rather than it being something that was supporting a lifestyle. Now, yes, you could say that, well, it was 2020, most people were just trying to survive. But this happens nowadays. I see this every day where people build a business and a brand where they become the brand, the business, and the bottleneck. And they can't get out of that. So they're stuck then in this hustle cycle where they're the only one that's responsible for the delivery, for the back end, for every single part of that business. So in my case, I was heavily pregnant, had the baby, took time off, and of course, revenue dipped. And this wasn't because we were doing anything wrong. We were promoting our teachers. We had an incredible team. tick, tick, tick for all of those things. It was purely just that people had been conditioned to come to my live classes. So looking back, I would have done that differently. I would have actually positioned the live classes as a more premium offering to encourage people to go and check out other teachers. I would have actually thought about what is my IP and how can I actually teach that to other people so they're still getting my essence, but they're not relying on my physical presence. I would have lent more into courses and all these things that we eventually had in the end and do have now, but that would have actually saved me a lot of burnout because I got to the end of that and I was feeling really, really tired. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have done it again. And I made a commitment in that moment. Okay, I'm never doing this again. Every new venture I go into, I am going to start with scalability in mind. No matter how minimal viable product, no matter how scrappy the initial idea is, I need to know that it actually can scale, not at the expense of me, not at the expense of my health, not at the expense of my lifestyle, none of that. So you need to ask yourself, is your business giving you energy or is it living on your energy? Because it's going to require some of you, right? If you are the business, if you are the face of your brand, you got to get out there and do the thing, right? But not at the expense of your nervous system, not at the expense of your health. There is a very, very clear difference. And sometimes it's nuanced, but it's ultimately rooted in building from alignment. Being so clear on your values, so clear on who you are, so clear on your current capacity, and building for the season of life that you're in. I often tell my clients, let's plan this situation for the worst possible case scenario. Your kid had gastro all night, or someone was sick, or the nanny called, couldn't come that day. Like, what does it look like on those days? Because it's really easy to have these big, lofty ideas about what it looks like when everything's going well. But when you're then pushed into a wall, at what cost, right? Sometimes our business requires more of us, but that needs to be evened out with these other periods of rest. It needs to work like a cycle. So there's 3 tangible markers that aren't super woo that you can look at to think, is my business purely built on hustle and do I need to shift that, or is it actually built on flow? So number 1, you actually have space to think. White space is not wasted. We are creative beings and we need space for that creativity to bubble up. If you're constantly filling the noise, then you are just reacting. And a lot of business owners fall into this trap because you're putting out fires. You're constantly putting out fires. You're not able to actually innovate, actually create this next level because you're stuck in that just constant trap of doing and busy. So number 1, of a flow-based business, you have space to sync. Number 2, your business has rhythms. So you have creation days, admin days, rest days. There's structure and there's boundaries. Boundaries not just with your clients or your team, but boundaries also with yourself, because how you lead yourself is how you lead other people. And if you can't hold yourself to your own boundary of not checking your phone first thing in the morning or having a solid sleep routine that doesn't require looking at a screen, whatever that is for you, how can you lead other people? How can you lead a team? So boundaries start with you, and you need these rhythms in your business so that it becomes this cycle that you can actually sustain over time, rather than something that you go hell for leather at and then completely burn out. And number 3, you're scaling with sustainability. Systems create freedom. Structure is what gives you freedom. Being able to lean into a system when things feel chaotic or when you're in a period of growth that requires a bit more grit, that requires a bit more of your presence, you know the system is there to hold you. If the system's not there, the whole thing crumbles the second that you step out. You do not have a flow-based business. So it's something for you to think about. Alignment isn't a vibe, it is a business model choice. Alignment over action, always. Start with alignment and then take aligned action towards the goals so that you can actually create a business in flow, not in this trap of hustle. I always imagine it like a hamster on a wheel, just around and around and around and around. Now, if this resonated and you actually are thinking, okay, there's probably some stuff I could look at, or I am indeed the brand, the business, and the bottleneck, how am I going to actually sustainably scale this? I have created a free training for you called the End of Hustle Culture, where I'm going to walk you through all of this. I'm going to pop the details below. You can click the link, and it's going to take you through a process of firstly assessing where are you at, Where are the holes? Where are the bits that you could be working on in your business? And then how are you going to actually create the system to sustain your sustainable growth so that you are not stuck in this hamster wheel of hustle, and you actually can create a business in alignment and in flow and in support of the life that you started your business to actually achieve. So I'll pop the details below, and I will be back with you again next week, and we're going to talk about all things energetic ROI.